Okay, now we're going to move from student to school strategies to the next area of affective engagement, which is student to student strategies. Student to student strategies. How do your low-performing students relate to the peers in their building? Sometimes, if they're in the discipline category, there are issues of peer-to-peer relationships. Sometimes the discipline doesn't have to do with peers, but sometimes it does. Okay? And some of these students who are marginalized, as the young lady Jennifer was referring to, don't really have any peers with whom they feel comfortable. So how can you build that? I want to talk to you about something that sounds totally counterintuitive. We called it the Graduate First Club, but it was basically our low-performing club. And you'd say to yourself, when would you ever think it's a good idea to take all of the worst behaving, worst attending, worst achieving kids and put them all together in a club? How bad an idea is that? Well, guess what? It worked. It worked. We had clubs in our middle school, we had clubs in our high schools, and in elementary school it would be even easier to schedule. Let me tell you how these clubs worked and how my skepticism was certainly totally allayed by watching them in action, because I actually visited my high school club in particular because I thought that would be the club that, I don't know if this is going to work. What they did was they scheduled the students during lunch period, because in elementary you could take them out of specials. In middle school they took them out of connections. But at high school they all had different electives, so you couldn't do that. So they took lunch periods at the high school. And the targeted students didn't all have the same lunch period, so they basically did it in the 3 lunch blocks. Twice a month during lunch, the Graduate First Club met. And this was the high school that gave out the Leading by Example gray bracelets. This is the one that had the Graduate First Club at the high school level. And they had structured adult-led activities. Like the first one was something about learning your own personal style. The second one was comparing personal style to teaching style. The third one was maybe learning styles. The fourth one was, because it was high school, how to do a job application. You know, what expectations do you have for postgraduate? You know, we set that expectation already that they're going to graduate. What do you want to do afterwards? So there was a structured activity, and plus the business partners paid for the pizzas and the sodas. So they didn't have the cafeteria lunch. They had a special lunch that made it special. Well, I was at the very first club meeting at that high school, and I will tell you, there was a young lady sitting like this, looking at me. I'm failing, and there's nothing that can be done. I'm going to flunk out, and that's it. And I said to her, just give it some time. We're doing some special things this year. We're really going to help. Let's just see how it goes. I didn't say, I was not going to be able to debunk that attitude, but I just wanted to let her know we're giving you some special things, some support. You know, this is a high school student. I'm not going to pat her on the back and say, it's going to be all right, honey. That's not appropriate. It wasn't appropriate in that situation. I could do that with my elementary kids, not at high school. So by the end of the year, here's that young lady who has spent 2 lunch periods a month for the entire school year with the same group of strugglers. And I didn't do well on that test either. Well, neither did I. Well, yeah, what did you think about? And they're talking to each other, and they're realizing they're not alone in these struggles. And they're getting support from each other. Rather than modeling the negative behaviors, they're starting to uplift each other. And during the course of the year, it was just incredible. At the end of the year celebration, she no longer had her arms crossed. She was up there animated, doing their end of year activity, planning for next year's club activity, the first one of the next year. And it was just a real transformation. So even though you'd think it would not be a good idea, let me tell you about the middle school club. We had several middle schools who did the club, and they used, and I know they probably weren't supposed to do this, so I'm not going to name the names of the schools, but they're in Metro Atlanta somewhere. Anyway, they took students out of connections so they could meet as a club. I know you're not supposed to miss your connections, but they didn't pick the same connection each time. There was a different one, you know, so it wasn't always the same one. And they met as a club, and of course they had their bracelets. The other kids wanted to be in the club. They wanted to know why they couldn't be in the club. We're talking about, in our case, it was 52 of the lowest academic behavior and attendance kids in the school, and they were in this select club. And what they did there was a really just fun activities, but they also had meaningful activities. They did things similar to what the high school did, but on more of a middle school level. They did a learning style inventory and those kinds of things. They did some conflict resolution activities, And a little bit of that middle school peer mediation stuff. When there is a conflict, how do you resolve it in a way using just your words, not any physicality and those kinds. And the kids really, really bonded to the point where their friends wanted to get in the club. And talk about feeling good about having, you know, by the time I'm middle school, you know, I've had a few years accumulating failure from elementary. But these kids just felt so good about being in the club. So again, counterintuitive, but it worked. With teacher-led guided activities, you know, not on your own, putting these kids in the room and saying, have fun, get to know each other. No, no, we would never do that. All right, cross-grade buddy programs. Much easier to do at the elementary level than at other grade levels. At the elementary, taking the 5th grade target kids and telling them that they can read to 1st graders when these are the kids who've struggled in reading, but if they're reading 1st grade level or 2nd grade level, putting them down to read to kindergartners makes them feel so great about what they're doing, and it lets the little kids feel like they have someone to look up to. How many times has that struggling student been put in a position where someone's looking up to him, someone's looking up to her? And here's an opportunity. What they did at this middle school that had one of the middle schools that had the club in terms of cross-grade budding, they were in the project for 3 years because this was a 5-year project, what we had. So they started out in the club in the 6th grade, then they moved to 7th, and when they got to 8th grade, the school team and the team leader decided together, let's try to let some of our 8th grade veteran club members go down to the 6th grade club. And basically, they buddied the 6th grade club. And talk about the big folks getting ready to go to high school next year, buddying these 6th graders who are just new to the club. Again, the lowest performing 6th graders, the lowest performing 7th graders, the lowest performing 8th graders, now buddying the lowest performing 6th graders. Amazing connections. Just really, really worked well. And then at North Gwinnett High School, they have an even more sophisticated peer mentoring program.
Once we pick our junior and senior mentors to work with our freshmen during our set-aside, dedicated advisement time each week. There's about 3 or 4 mentors to each group of freshmen with 1 teacher supervising. There's a lot of training and all that goes into it. We look at the strengths and the interests of our most struggling students in the target group, and we look at the strongest mentors who have the same interests, and we make sure they're in the group. And we don't ever tell them you need to connect with this kid. We just follow up with conversations and encourage and talk to them so that we can make sure that we know that connection has been made. And it's been very, very powerful. And sometimes they'll tell a student something they may not ask a teacher about.
And tell how they're selected. Selected. This is really interesting.
Our mentors don't want anyone else just working with their freshmen, so the graduating mentors interview the incoming mentors to make sure that they would be an appropriate match, and that's something they decided they wanted to do on their own, so it was really neat. Laura's going to talk about Air Saturdays, and I want to go and check it out, so y'all listen up.
Yes, thanks. You know, we can learn something new every day, and Jennifer was first time she heard about Air Saturday, she was like, oh, that gives me some ideas. So again, she's high school. I'm going to be talking about Air Saturdays at one of my middle schools, but you can adapt whatever grade level you're working with. This is the Air Saturday is an example of student-to-student relationships and how we can build them.